produced and brought to you by the Drug Policy Forum of Texas. I'm your host, Ricky Carroll. Our guest tonight is Barry Cooper, who created and produced the video Never Get Busted. We'll be talking to Barry here in a few minutes. First, we'll try to bring you up to date on some of the news from the world of drugs and drug law. So I think we'll start with something a little bit on the lighter side tonight. Keith Richards apparently has found a new and different way to get high. According to NME, the British music magazine, Keith Richards said that after his father died a few years ago, Keith took some of his father's cremated ashes, ground them up, mixed them with a little high-grade cocaine, and snorted his father. He says he has bonded with his dad in a way that he never bonded before. He also said he did not recommend anyone else trying this. On a more serious note, of course, New Mexico is now the 12th state to have passed a medical marijuana act. Governor Richardson has signed it, so it's the law in that state now. We can hope that the Texas legislature sees fit to follow along as well. The medical marijuana acts continue to progress in several other states. It looks like probably 3 or 4 others will pass bills during this legislative term. Okay. Tonight we have with us Barry Cooper, as I say, who produced the video Never Get Busted. He's now developed that into a successful company, nevergetbusted.com. We're going to discuss several matters concerning his previous career in law enforcement and other things having to do with the world of drugs. Remember, our phone lines are open tonight. We'll have the number up on the screen for you, so please feel free to call in with questions or comments as the evening progresses. Barry, it's nice to have you with us tonight.
I'm honored to be here in Houston.
Okay, why don't you start out by telling us a little bit about yourself?
I'm not sure exactly where you want me to start.
Well, how did you get interested in drugs and drug law, for instance?
When I was 21 years old and first went to the police academy, I was going for the excitement.
Yeah.
It wasn't really to help people. I was young and wanted to be in the middle of things.
I think that's fairly common with people going into police work.
Yes, sir.
Where did you go to work as a policeman?
I worked first for the Gladewater Police Department, then the Big Sandy Police Department, and then the Permian Basin Drug Task Force.
Okay, now you might tell us where those places are for people that are not familiar with the names.
Gladewater Police Department is a small department 100 miles east of Dallas, Texas.
Okay.
Big Sandy Police Department is in the same area. And the Permian Basin Drug Task Force covered 19 counties in the West Texas area of Odessa and Midland.
Right. And, of course, with the Drug Task Force, you were working an extended area there.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And how long were you active in law enforcement?
8 years.
8 years.
In total, yes, sir. That's right.
That's building a pretty good career.
My 8 years was comparable to 20 years of most police officers. I went 24/7 as hard as I could go.
You did go where the action was then?
Yes, sir.
And how did you get interested in going with the drug task force?
I've trained dogs all my life. Cow dogs, coon dogs, yard dogs. As a young police officer, narcotic detector dogs were just making their way into the police departments. And I trained my own drug dog. I thought that would be interesting, and that's what launched my narcotics career.
So you were, excuse me, I'm having trouble with allergies and tree pollens at this time of year. So you were active handling drug dogs then for a large part of the time?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
Okay. And then moved from
municipal police work to the larger multi-jurisdictional task force? Was this also primarily a dog handling job, or did you have greater responsibilities there?
A lot more responsibilities after receiving training from the ATF, the Drug Enforcement Administration, our U.S. military, Border Patrol. They turned me loose to do just about every drug enforcement you could imagine, but the main focus was training narcotic detector dogs and highway interdiction.
Okay. Now, these multi-jurisdictional task force, as you've indicated, involve several different kinds of police organizations working together. Is that correct?
That's usually correct. We were under the Texas Narcotics Control Program, but we were one of only, out of like 50 some odd task force, we were one of the 3 that was actually our own agency. They did not pull officers from different departments like normal. We were one of the few that was our own agency.
Okay. Now, if we look at the history of Texas recently, whether we're looking at some of the situations that developed in Hearn, whether we're looking at some of the things in the Liberty County area, whether we're looking at the big scandal up at Tulia, drug task force haven't gotten a very good name in the state over the years. Do you know much about that, or why these situations developed?
Sloppy training.
Sloppy training?
Allowing the wrong people to carry that type of authority.
Okay. Just sloppy training, or would there be some sloppy supervision as well?
Absolutely. That goes along with the training. It's the supervisor's job to train.
Okay. We have a caller.
Okay.
Hello, caller. You're on the air.
Yes, this is Michael Donald. And I was calling to ask the good man there. He seems to be an upstanding gentleman. Just moved here from Nebraska, and of course we had a lot of problems with methamphetamines or whatnot. And I wondered if they had the same problems here in the city of Houston, or whether methamphetamines was as big a deal as in Nebraska.
I think methamphetamine is a problem all over the country, but I do not agree with how we're trying to solve that problem by imprisoning nonviolent methamphetamine users. If methamphetamine carries somebody to the point that they feel like they have to commit a crime against persons and property, then it's nevergetbusted.com stance that they need to go to jail for that crime but not the drug. And what that ensures is the millions of people who do use methamphetamine that never commit a crime, they don't wind up in a government cage.
Well, actually, I would probably disagree with the caller that we have a methamphetamine problem. Now, for a few years, we've had a problem with small batch methamphetamine manufacturers who were trying to do advanced organic chemistry with high school educations or less. But there's really, as far as the body's concerned, no difference between methamphetamine and the other amphetamines that have been used regularly since the 1930s. Those are manufactured by pharmaceutical companies with absolutely no risk. They were used by millions of people. Now, yes, a very, very few amphetamine and cocaine users develop psychotic reactions which require treatment. Some of them in long stages act out in a paranoid fashion and get involved in crimes which need to be treated as violent crimes. But in absolute numbers, methamphetamine or amphetamine users in general are still pretty small numbers.
I agree. It's not the problem that we've been propagated to believe. It's just not the problem. Yeah. It's the same argument, Professor, as saying that people are dealing drugs to our kids. That's propaganda. All my years of law enforcement, working undercover and running search warrants and working on the highway, I not one time ever saw a pusher trying to sell to a 10-year-old.
No.
Because 10-year-olds don't have money.
That's right.
And my answer to that, too, is how often have you heard of in your own community of a kid dying from a drug overdose of methamphetamine or cocaine or marijuana or heroin? It's just not there. It's a lie. It's not happening.
Yeah, and when kids do use drugs, they're drugs that they get from other kids.
Or out of their mother's medicine
Well, right
cabinet.
now, the
prescription
big problem
medications.
is prescription medication. But frankly, I have never seen a drug seller. They're drug dealers. But a seller is someone like a used car salesman. He works hard to make you buy his product. I never saw anyone have to sell a drug in my life.
Good point.
They simply stand on the street corner and people come up and beg for the product. So they're trying to sell the kids, or they're making special deals to get people hooked. It just doesn't happen.
It's the recent report 3 days ago on CNN I saw, and they found methamphetamine that had candy mixed in with it.
Yeah.
And the assumption was the police think drug dealers are trying to entice kids into using amphetamine. That's crazy. What happened is they're mixing amphetamine in with powder candies to avoid detection from police officers because it looks just like powdered candy.
Well, not only that, a large amount of amphetamine is still snorted rather than injected.
Correct.
And it's horrible on nose tissue. I mean, it burns, it tastes horrible. So if you mix it with a little candy, as the song said, a little bit of sugar makes the medicine go down.
Right.
So, yeah, it's a marketing ploy, but it's for the adult users. It's not for kids.
Correct.
The funny thing is, it's the same hysteria that we hear repeated every 5 to 10 years about a different drug. You can take almost any of these stories we're hearing today about methamphetamine, flip the calendar back to 1984, and read exactly the same stories about crack cocaine.
Can I read what was quoted to the Senate in 1937 about marijuana?
Okay, please do. Yeah.
The former Assistant Alcohol Prohibition Commissioner, Harry Anslinger, they call him the father in the war on drugs. Here's an excerpt of his testimony before a Senate hearing. I'll read it. It's 2 sentences. There are 100,000 total marijuana smokers in the U.S., and most are Negroes, Hispanics, Filipinos, and entertainers. Their satanic music, jazz, and swing result from the marijuana use. This marijuana causes white women to seek sexual relations with Negroes, entertainers, and any others. The primary reason to outlaw marijuana is its effect on the degenerate races. Marijuana is an addictive drug which produces in its users insanity, criminality, and death. You smoke a joint and you're likely to kill your brother. Now, he was the one who started, back then it was called the Federal Narcotics Bureau, which later turned into the DEA. But here's our government in 1937 making these crazy claims, and they're still doing it today about other drugs.
There's more to it than that. There was a movie produced in about 1935, Reefer Madness.
Yes.
And the federal government paid the production cost from it. I used to start my class every semester by showing the rather hysterical introduction to that involving marijuana. And then I found out a new movie in the 90s about kids and raves and ecstasy was almost an exact remake. We just hear the same stories. Hello, caller, you're on the air.
Hi, this is Marilyn. I wanted to know if in Houston or in Texas primarily, is the prescription drug use is out of hand as we've come to hear and know, especially with the whole Anna Nicole Smith and the illegal drugs
Thank you, Marilyn. What about prescription drugs, Barry?
Professor, you start. I've got a lot of answers for that. The first thing that comes to my head is our federal government has classified marijuana as a Schedule 1, meaning high abuse potential and no medical use. Yet, Schedule 3 prescription drugs, they've allowed a pharmacist to take THC and put it in Marinol, a marijuana tablet, and they call it medicine.
Right.
So is it medicine or is it not medicine?
Well, I kind of approach it from the other side. One of the most valuable medicines that we have had for a long time have been the derivatives of opium. And the primary ones we see in medical use are morphine, are the ones like Vicodin that I suspect all of us have had from our dentist at one time or another. As far as the body's concerned, these are exactly the same drug as heroin.
Correct.
Research the federal government did showed that experienced heroin users could not tell the difference between morphine and heroin injections. The problem we have had has been that the federal government particularly has taught that some drugs are evil and some drugs are good. And drugs aren't good or evil. Drugs are chemicals. They can be used or they can be abused. And we've got a problem right now with kids, teenagers especially, who we have taught with a hammer that, to quote the school counselor from South Park, drugs are bad, don't do drugs, Kay.
I don't teach my kids that.
No, I don't. But that's been the message.
You're right.
So when the kids see something that's in a prescription bottle with their mother's name on it from a doctor, gee, that can't be a drug because that's not bad. So sure enough, they take Oxycontin or Vicodin, and it affects them the same way that heroin would. Or they take something really nasty like Xanax that causes a problem. But even so, the numbers still aren't that big. I mean, we're talking here small fractions of 1% of the population being involved in illegal drug use at all.
My take on that matter, I'll just add this short note to that, is when the government is allowing the multi-billion-dollar pharmaceutical companies to put it on the street, it's legal. If an American citizen puts it on the street, it's illegal.
We need to take a break now.
Great.
We'll be back in just a short time with Barry Cooper, and we'll talk more about Never Get Busted when we come back.
Okay.
You're watching Drugs, Crime, and Politics on Houston Media Sports.
This week in drug war history, March 27, 2001, Governor Garcia of Chihuahua, Mexico, says he would support legalization of certain drugs to dilute the power of criminal groups that benefit from the black market. March 28, 2002, Federal Judge Emmett G. Sullivan rules that the Barr Amendment effectively prohibited the plaintiffs from gathering signatures to place Washington, D.C.'s medical marijuana initiative on the ballot. March 28, 2003, the Hemp Industries Association, several hemp food and cosmetic manufacturers, and the Organic Consumer Association petitioned the Ninth Circuit to once again prevent the DEA from ending the legal sale of hemp seed and oil products in the U.S. March 29, 2000, CNN reports that a multinational drug sweep known as Operation Conquistador netted 2,331 arrests. March 30th, 1961, the UN Single Convention on Narcotic Drugs is convened in New York City. This is Steve Nolan for the Drug Truth Network.
Okay, maybe a little of the money I spend on marijuana supports terror and violence.
Right.
And that's because marijuana is illegal.
Exactly.
when I buy a beer, that doesn't support terror because beer is legal, right?
Now you've got it.
So what you're saying is if we make marijuana legal and regulate it like beer, that wouldn't support violence.
Did I say that?
Okay, we're back with Barry Cooper of NeverGetBusted.com. Barry, how did you move from law enforcement with a drug task force into producing something like a video called Never Get Busted?
Compassion. Compassion and maturity.
Okay.
When I was in my 20s, kicking in doors with other men with more riot gear and more weapons than we could ever imagine, and dragging parents away from their children. I remember one raid, I was the K-9 handler, and I was searching through the house, and I noticed report cards, 3 kids, and they all were straight-A students. The mother had a little hair-cutting shop, and the father worked in the oil field, and I was thinking then, golly, I just destroyed this home over a bag of pot and terrorized these people. So when I quit law enforcement, began raising my own family, learned some lessons in life. I just learned to be more compassionate, and I started rewinding, looking at all the damage I had caused. And then I myself had become the target of 5 unjustified arrests in the 10 years out of law enforcement, including being arrested for not returning 2 DVDs to a local video store on time. They were late movies, and they arrested me for theft. This was in 2006, recently. So my wife and I were pillow talking, and I said, this has got to stop. Our courts are doing nothing to protect my Fourth Amendment rights of unreasonable arrests.
Yeah.
And I crossed the line many times to put people in jail and broke the Fourth Amendment. And I just put the two and two together. I learned 1 in 32 adults in America now are either on probation, on parole, or in prison. We're building the walls to our own prisons. And I thought that'd be time to do whatever I could to educate the public with good, solid information, teach them what a cop thinks, and to do anything I can to frustrate law enforcement's efforts to put non-violent American citizens in prison.
Well, as I've been watching this, more and more my mind keeps going back to the Vietnam War. And at that time, we were bombarded on the news every night with body counts. We've got to be winning because we got so many thousand more Cong today. We captured 17 North Vietnamese tanks today. And more when I pick up the newspaper and I read, we got a boat with 20 tons of coke off Panama this week. We got another 100 pounds of cocaine in South Florida this week. It sure, to me, sounds like we're getting body counts rather than results. That the traffic just keeps going, and all the cops are doing is skimming their tax off the top as it goes through.
I totally agree. It's nonsense. This is not a war on drugs. It's a war on people.
Yeah.
And it is a war. When you have a war, there are frontline soldiers, which I was. And when you have a war, you have prisoners of war. Our drug offenders that are in prison, 338,000 nonviolent drug offenders in prison tonight, those are prisoners of war that do not belong there.
I saw figures today that just in the state of Texas, there are 20,000 nonviolent, non-trafficking drug prisoners in the state of Texas. Another caller. Caller, you're on the air.
Yes, I had a question. I'm a chronic pain patient. I do live in Houston, and I am currently on prescription for Marinol, and I am curious. I looked at the flyer that came with the medication, the package circular, and it's my impression that the Marinol compound is not identical to the substance that is in, marijuana. That it's an analog, an artificial analog, and may not be as recommendable as the real thing. And I feel that Marinol is just an attempt. It's $20 per capsule. A month's supply costs $1,200, and it seems to me that it's awful curious that the drug companies came out with a substance they can patent and make $20 a capsule from, whereas the real thing is practically free. And I'm concerned as well because, like I say, this seems to be an analog of THC and not identical to it. I think that could have some negative repercussions for people who are prescribed Marinol, thinking that it's identical to marijuana.
Okay, thank you. It's probably one I should try to answer.
Well, what I was going to say,
ahead.
if you decide, for the caller, if you decide to buy what's illegal marijuana now, I can teach you how not to get busted for that. But I think he's right. The professor needs to answer about the compounds of the difference in the two.
Okay. Now, way back in the 1980s, the DEA had a real problem. Marijuana was proving its use in several different medical fields, and they had just lost a lawsuit and were having to supply government-grown marijuana to about 30 patients for medical use under a government program that's still going on today. None of the regular pharmaceutical companies were interested in marijuana. I mean, after all, it's a plant. There's nothing you can patent. So the DEA used government money to fund an over-the-counter drug manufacturer to do the research to pick the main chemical, not the only chemical, but the main chemical out of marijuana, figure out a way to make it usable in an oral dose, which involved putting it in sesame seed oil. And they named the result Marinol. Now, the reason why the DEA founded this particular research was so that they could go to the public and say, you don't have to take marijuana because here's a safe legal pill that does exactly the same thing. They originally scheduled it as Schedule 2, which meant there were quite a few controls on it. Doctors prescribed Marinol to people, and people quit taking it because they didn't like the way it worked. They went back to street marijuana. The DEA, on its own initiative, rescheduled it down a notch to Schedule 3, which makes it like Vicodin, much, much easier to get. And frankly, most doctors don't prescribe it. Most patients don't use it. Dosage levels are problematic with it. And the ironic thing, and this is something you can probably comment better, I mean, I have known people who sniff airplane glue. When I was a kid, people would gobble up literally handfuls of morning glory seeds hoping to get high on it. I've seen people smoke banana peels. The one thing I have never heard of anywhere is anyone on the street taking Marinol as a recreational drug. Now, I can't recommend this guy go against his doctor's advice. That's between him and his doctor. But I do know nationwide, most patients that have tried the Marinol haven't liked it. They seem to think it's not a good substitute for the whole plant marijuana.
Same reports I've gotten.
Yeah. So let's hear more about what he should do not to get busted. Well, first let's take this next caller and then a break. Hello, caller, you're on the air.
Hello, Buford. This is Dean. Turn it.
Yeah, Dean.
Hi. Wanted to just contribute a couple of thoughts.
Okay.
You're talking about Marinol as a substitute for marijuana?
as a supposed substitute for.
Well, that's right, exactly. And I guess something I wanted to point out. I think it was about 2 weeks ago. There was a British organization that released a rating of the various drugs. I think it was heroin, cocaine, and on down to, I think, marijuana was number 11. But what was not mentioned or rated in those various drugs was coca and opium, which were the much preferred drugs prior to Prohibition. Much safer, more easier to titrate your dosage, I think, than to just take some pill or an injection. I think it's our policy that creates all the harms that are then used as justification for continuing this. I wanted to alert your viewers that this week on my radio shows, Cultural Baggage and Century of Lies, I will have reports from the National African American Drug Policy Convention, which was last week in Washington, D.C. Also wanted to invite folks to attend a panel, April 10th, Are We Winning the War on Drugs? This is at Houston Community College, Fry Road at I-10. Will feature Stan Fursey of the High Intensity Drug Trafficking Area for Houston, Marcia Baker of Phoenix House, Dr. Joel Hogman, Director of the National Pain Doctors, and me. And it's at 12:30 p.m., just afternoon. You can learn more about it, all of these things, by visiting my website, which is drugtruth.net. I want to thank Barry for having been my guest a few months back. I recommend his video. I think it's something that we all could learn from, and I appreciate this chance to talk to your viewers.
Okay, and Dean, where on the FM dial can people find you again?
Oh, it is 90.1 FM. That's KPFT Houston. And Cultural Baggage airs at 7 p.m. Friday. Century of Lies airs at 1 p.m. And I appreciate it, Buford.
Thank you, Dean.
Hey, good to hear from you again, Dean.
You too, Barry. Keep up the good work.
Hey, you too, my friend. Look forward to working together some more.
All righty.
Let's take another quick break, and then we'll come back and find out how to never get busted.
All right.
Houston Normal will be having our 6th annual 420 Fest and membership drive at the Last Concert Cafe on April 20th. The doors open at 4:20 with the drum circle, and anyone with a drum gets in free before 5. It's time for a change, and you can help. We'll have as our special guest the editor of High Times magazine, Steve Bloom, along with various activists from local reform organizations. We'll have some live music from the Two High String Band, the Hightailers, and Pot Roast, to name a few. Honor the lost with our Drug War Memorial and see the new exhibits from the Hipstorian. Find out what you can do to help change the laws of marijuana prohibition in Texas. That's April 20th, starting at 4:20 p.m. The Last Concert Cafe is located at 1403 Nance Street. For more information, see HoustonNormal.org.
Moving too fast to take time for the things you really enjoy? Positiva can help bring back the pleasure of activities you used to love. Some of the highlights of Positiva may include increased appetite, lower blood pressure, and significantly lower stress. People who take Positiva discover a whole new outlook on life. Positiva may not be right for everyone. Consult your physician today. Positiva. Now you have a choice, a positive choice. For more information, visit us online at www.normal.org.
Welcome back. We're with Barry Cooper, author and producer of Never Get Busted. And apparently one of the questions people really are concerned with is, what about drug dogs? What do these drugs do? Can you avoid them? What's the story behind drug dogs?
To understand that quickly, the way a drug dog is trained, first, they're not addicted to the drugs, like some people think. A dog actually thinks they're looking for a toy, a tennis ball, and we train them by scenting the tennis ball or the toy with substances. Now, a narcotic detector dog, or any dog, they smell substances like you and I see.
Yeah.
And this is all explained in my DVD. When we see a pot of stew, we see carrots, potatoes, onions, peppers. When a dog, but we smell one odor.
Yeah.
Stu, a dog smells like we see. He goes, carrots, potatoes, pepper. He can separate odors. So people that mask their marijuana in coffee grounds and all these different substances, Bounty fabric softener, mustard, I found it wrapped in everything, cellophane. The dog goes, Bounty fabric softener, coffee grounds, grease, cellophane, marijuana, and then he alerts. So masking odors do not work.
Yeah.
Now, a narcotic detector dog has to come along a scent cone in order to smell the substance to alert.
Right.
People often ask, how in the world does a canine smell through the metal of the gas tank, smell through the gas tank, smell through the PVC pipe, and smell the marijuana concealed inside? Dogs can't smell through anything. What happens, everything's porous. Even a plastic bag. When I trained police officers all over the state of Texas, before the class started, I would fill a baggie full of tuna fish and pass it around and ask them to smell it. You cannot smell the tuna fish.
Yeah.
At the end of the class, you pass that same baggie around and you can smell the tuna fish. Even plastic has microscopic pores for odors to seep through.
Yeah.
So the dog can't smell through anything. The odor seeped through the PVC pipe, through the gasoline, through the metal gas tank, and leaves a scent cone on the outside for the dog to alert.
Yeah.
Now, what I've exposed on my DVD, and you mentioned this when we were at break, I would have to say 20%, and that's a high estimate, 20% of the narcotic detector dog teams that I praised and trained and taught schools, which would be in the thousands, only 20% were efficient enough to actually detect narcotics. The Mexicans are still wrapping it in all this stuff because they wrapped 50 pounds, put it in the trunk. The dog walked around and didn't alert, and the car kept going, and they thought, well, it was the masking odors. It wasn't. It was just a sorry dog. But even more dangerous than that, and on my video, and you can even see this clip free. Go to my website, nevergetbusted.com. I have free previews you can see, and I have made it public that it is absolutely common for police officers to make their drug dogs false alert to gain access into vehicles. And I've got proof. If you go to nevergetbusted.com, go to the sneak preview. It's real easy to find. And you will witness a police officer talking his dog into scratching at nothing on the ground. And they do that all the time because the Supreme Court has ruled that an alert from a documented trained narcotic detector dog is probable cause to search.
Well, one reason I asked the question, several years ago, I was driving from here to New Orleans, and on the Louisiana side of the border, I was stopped for weaving within my lane. Now, there's a good traffic offense. The policeman told me he was not going to write me a ticket. I wonder why. But he wanted me to sign a voluntary consent to search the car. I told him no, that I was a lawyer, I believed in the Constitution, and that he and I should both follow what the Fourth Amendment said, so I was not going to consent. And he said, in that case, I'm going to have to ask you to wait here until I can bring a drug dog. Got there within 30 seconds. And I am still certain that that dog alerted to a hand signal from his handler. They searched the car thoroughly and found nothing. I was worried because, you turn your car over to a valet parker, you take it to a mechanic, you don't know who snuffed out a roach in an ashtray in the car. But,
exactly.
Yeah. But they found nothing this time.
Here's what we're doing to help combat that. In the next 2 or 3 days, there is a page on our website that maps where U.S. citizens are likely to encounter interdiction officers across the U.S., and we grade them on their willingness or unwillingness to break the Fourth Amendment. Yeah. And what this has done, I made the first entry in an email, a local volunteer constable working interdiction on I-20 between Tyler and Longview. I have 2 videos that a defense attorney gave me of him causing his dog to false alert. Yeah. So I made that public. And now the word is on the street that got back to me, this guy's name's Mark Waters. He stopped that behavior because now somebody's watching him. Yeah. So hopefully through our efforts, nevergetbusted.com, that's one of our goals, is to become the watchdog of these drug dog teams that are unscrupulous, that cause their dogs to false alert and do an illegal search like they did on you.
Well, the other thing, I know a few years back, a couple of federal district courts allowed the defense attorneys to have the dogs brought into court and tested in court. And that in all of the cases in which the dogs were actually objectively tested, none of them performed any better than random on locating drugs, and several of the federal courts actually excluded dog search evidence on the grounds that it was not scientifically valid. Are you familiar with any of this? Or?
I'm familiar with it enough that I've made this statement. Any attorney that wants me to come to court and cause that dog to false alert in front of a jury or to alert where the drugs are not, I can do it. It's not the dog's fault. Yeah. It's the handler. These unscrupulous handlers have the dog. It's like the horse that everybody thought could count years ago. Yeah. I can make any drug dog false. Exactly. The drug dog's miss of 10 years ago, nobody understood the principle, so they automatically, a dog did it, and a dog won't lie. A dog couldn't lie. They're friendly, they're neat, and they took them around the schools. No, the truth is they do lie when they're a handler, and dogs are so perceptive. I never had to say anything to my dog to get him to false alert. I could think it strong enough and make one little move, and he knew exactly what I wanted him to do, and he would jump up and scratch.
That's like your story of Hans the horse.
Exactly.
His owner believed the horse was smart. He didn't realize that he was giving the signals. Hello, caller. You're on the air.
Yes, sir. This is Ed calling back. I am a chronic pain patient.
Yes.
One thing I might want you guys to comment on is that one terrible effect of this drug war hysteria has been for us, for we chronic pain patients, because if you are on a number of Schedule 3 or Schedule 2 pain meds and you go to apply for a job, you're going to have to make a full disclosure of all your meds, and they say to you, and you know they would if they didn't get sued, they say to themselves, we cannot hire this dope addict. He couldn't possibly do a day's work if he's taking morphine or some pain medication, and it's just total ignorance. And I think this hysteria is doing tremendous damage to the individuals, such as I, and to the society, because it's keeping us out of jobs we could be doing.
Thank you. I've got a comment or two about that, but we need to take a break first.
Mitchell Lawrence, a 17-year-old from Great Barrington, Massachusetts. He won't be graduating from high school with his friends this spring. He can't. He's in jail, serving a 2-year sentence for selling 1 joint's worth of marijuana, about a teaspoonful, to an undercover cop. He's never been arrested before, but he got 2 years in prison for 1 joint's worth of pot. Not community service, not a fine. 2 years. A cost to taxpayers of nearly $100,000, and a criminal record for life. How could this happen in America when 100 million Americans have smoked marijuana? It takes 2 things, a bad law and a cruel prosecutor. Mitchell was busted in a drug-free school zone. But drug-free zone laws keep drugs out of our schools and protect our kids, right? Wrong. These laws do nothing to protect children. They just fill our prisons with young people like Mitchell Lawrence. 98% of people arrested in drug-free school zones weren't selling drugs to children. 95% of all sales aren't near any schools. And most of those arrested didn't even know they were in a so-called school zone, including Mitchell Lawrence. He didn't know that virtually the entire town of Great Barrington, like most American cities, is covered by giant drug-free zones. Mandatory prison for anyone arrested within 1,000 feet of a school. That's 3 football fields. It's a bad law that cruel prosecutors abuse, like fanatical District Attorney David Capeless. He decided to press school zone charges on Mitchell Lawrence, a felony for a $20 sale. What happened to Mitchell is happening to young Americans all around the country. The only thing unusual about Mitchell is the color of his skin. 97% of all people arrested in drug-free zones aren't white.
I'm going to start out by answering the last caller on the pain medication problem and the problem with employers. And the real problem here is education. Employers, like everyone else, are scared to death of drugs. And unless you're willing and can find a good lawyer and can go to court and prove that this is a true medical disability and that it does not affect your drug performance or your job performance, then the employer probably has a right to fire you for absolutely no reason at all or for any reason he dreams up. It's called employment at will. I would also say that there have developed a few actual medical specialists in pain medication who are quite familiar with dealing with patients on what to most of us are horrifying amounts of opiates, up to 10 to 20 times the fatal dosage every day. These people can talk to employers better than almost anyone else, but so far you don't have very many legal rights. So I want to go back to Barry with another question, and this is, when I was telling you my story of having been stopped, I refused to consent to the policeman searching the car. Did I do the right thing there?
My recommendation has a twist to what attorneys have taught and what most of America believes, and these are my recommendations. Okay. I think you did the right thing. If you do not have anything in your car, or if you have a small amount of something illegal hidden, okay, let me back up. If you do not have anything in your car, refuse consent. If you have large amounts in your car, refuse consent. If you've got small amounts not hidden well, like in the glove box or under the seat, refuse consent and hope for the best. I recommend in my video, if a person has a small amount hidden really well, give consent to search. Here's why. Anytime a refusal is made, police officers regard that as one of the highest reasonable suspicions that this person has something to hide. They're not supposed to, but they do that. Then the call goes out over the radio. We have a refusal. We have a refusal. And then you see what you see all the time. 20 cops and 10 drug dogs. Yeah. And they do a really good, thorough search. So if you have a small amount hidden really well in your car, I say give them permission. Say, sure, you can search. Then that one cop that you're talking to, he'll check the glove box, he'll check the trunk, and he'll let you go and wait for, usually. But there's no absolutely perfect answer to that question because every circumstance is different. Well, yeah, you did the right thing.
I think the other thing is most of us lawyers tell clients, insist on your rights, don't say anything, but we also have the feeling that when it comes right down to it and gets to court, the cops won't lie anyway.
Right, and I've tried to explain that to people in all the controversy. The drug reformation community really trashed me for making that comment on my video. Yeah. And my explanation is my videos never get busted I'm trying to keep the person from going to jail.
Right.
A lawyer and the other reformations are trying to make a good court case for the person after they've been arrested. And that's not working. They're being convicted over and over and over and over and over. I understand flexing your rights.
You're a whole lot better off never get arrested.
Exactly. So the point of my DVD at nevergetbusted.com is to keep them from getting to that point. And if I said the same thing that everybody says, always refuse consent, then I would have been shortchanging the public. Right. I wanted to tell them what was going on from a cop's perspective.
Better to have a half-assed search and be on your way.
Thank you.
Hello, caller. You're on the air.
Yeah. I want to know when they're going to legalize marijuana.
Okay. That's the question that we've all been asking ourselves for 50 years now, is when are we going to legalize marijuana? And I think I can safely say it's coming, but I don't know when anymore. Once I rationally made the prediction of within 5 years, and that didn't pan out.
I don't know. Who knows? I do know the conscience of the community, the conscience of America has figured out we need to legalize it.
And the cops have figured out it's not doing any good.
Exactly.
They're spinning their wheels. Hello, caller. You're on the air.
Good afternoon, gentlemen. Hey, I actually have a question about office drug tests. And if you are required to submit to one, and if it's on site, or if it's kind of an impromptu deal. Any advice on that?
Go ahead.
In most circumstances, you've got no choice. As I mentioned earlier, for most jobs in the United States, unless you have a specific written contract or you're in a union that has a good contract, you're in a situation we call employment at will, which means that your employer can fire you simply because he feels like it. So if he tells you to stand on your head and pee in a cup and you say no, he can fire you, and it doesn't matter whether it's a drug test or not. Drug tests, unfortunately, are popular among employers, but in most instances, they can fire you for refusing to take one, they can fire you for taking one, they can fire you for passing one, they can fire you for flunking one, they can fire you because you forgot to lace your shoes that morning. So pretty much in on-the-job situations, you're screwed. Hello, caller, you're on the air.
Hello?
Hello?
Hello.
Yes, sir? We'll get back to you later. Okay.
He's having a good time.
Yeah. Any last little things you want to say, Barry? We're about to run out of time again.
I'm just glad to be in Houston. And hey, check out nevergetbusted.com. Our goal there was to drastically reduce citizens' chances of winding up in a government cage behind, drugs.
Yeah. Unfortunately, a lot of them do end up there. So
They do.
I hope you have a lot of success with your endeavors there.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
One last question. A couple of weeks ago, we had a man here who had been a jailer at the local jail. And he said that the best place he knew of in the city to get high was the trash can just outside the Sally Port at the booking office. Because that the police would bring someone in, they're pat down and frisk at the scene of the arrest, hadn't picked up that last rock or two in the blue jeans pocket, and it was a whole lot easier for the police to just dump it in the trash can there than to go through the paperwork of another charge. What's been your experience along that line?
Well, what strikes me there is if we can't... It's just crazy to think we can keep drugs out of our country when we can't even keep them out of our prison.
Yeah.
And the prison guards, the reason marijuana is so prevalent in prison, they want it there. Because it calms the prisoners down.
That's right.
It's an anti-aggressive drug.
It is.
And I think people on probation for crimes, instead of when they pee dirty for marijuana, they get rearrested.
Yeah.
I think they should be prescribed marijuana and allowed to smoke it, because people that smoke pot sit at home and they just don't burglarize and kill people.
Are you trying to tell me then that anyone arrested for an assault should probably be placed on probation with mandatory marijuana?
Well, they certainly shouldn't go to jail if they're placed on probation for assault and pee dirty for marijuana. They should be patted on the back and say, oh, you've learned how to manage your anger.
Well, I'm glad you could be with us here tonight. I've got another message. And for a change, my editorial tonight is directed to one specific person in the state of Texas. That is Representative Diane White DeLisi of Temple, Texas, the chair of the House Public Health Committee. Diane, you should be ashamed of yourself. There is no excuse for not setting public hearings on House Bill 1534, which would allow medical use of marijuana in the state of Texas. Your refusal is a blatant example of substituting your uninformed prejudices for the will of the people. Polls show over 70% of the population favors allowing seriously ill people to use marijuana medically if their doctors recommend. The science behind medical marijuana is impeccable now. It's uncontrovertible. It's as safe as any substance known. Water literally kills more people from overdose each year than marijuana has ever done. No one has ever died from an overdose of marijuana. The only people who deny the medical effectiveness of marijuana today are police agencies like the Drug Enforcement Agency, which has absolutely no competence to speak about anything medicinal. Legislatures as democratic government function only as open and transparent organizations. I have no idea whether 1534 will pass or not. That's not the point here, although I personally think it should. What I do know is that that bill, like any other, should be publicly and openly debated by the members of the legislature, with the public in attendance and participating, and for you, by your own selfish act of superiority, to deny a public hearing shows that you do not understand the difference between a legislator and a tyrant. Schedule the hearing, Diane. And the rest of you might write her as well. Thank you and good evening. Thank you, Mary.
Yes, sir.
This is the time, ladies and gentlemen, to pick up the telephone and call your representative, your state senator, or even better, go visit them in their district office and tell them you want a hearing on 1534. Remember, it's your legislature.
The drug war is over. The day we want it to be.